Hey, we're here at Jeff's study.
My indoor one.
Your indoor study.
Yeah, we were thinking about doing the outdoor version of this in the fire porch, but it's 0 degrees and it was going to take a lot of work to get that heated up. And
camera lenses were literally freezing over, so we had to come inside.
So yeah, we're in my basement.
I like the idea of a traveling podcast.
I know, right? Yeah. Jake even went to the wrong place. He went out to the porch, probably hoping, oh, please God, let it be inside. This is freezing out here.
It's bound to be a good podcast down here in the study.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Average Pastor Podcast. I'm Mark, and I'm here with my friends Jeff and Jake, and we are pastor friends on mission, having conversations, talking about our worlds, what's going on, and we
still very average.
Yeah.
Still very.
One
of my family members, extended family members, pointed out, they've been watching or listening to the podcast, and they pointed out in love of, Jake, you trail off in your sentences and we can't understand what you're saying. So I just want to say that I'm really sorry, and I'm gonna try.
We have a lot of half-baked thoughts and unfinished sentences, and that's just par for the course here. What is it? We're talking about we're on mission, friends on mission. What's the mission again? What are we? I was thinking, yeah. How would you? We value friendship, mm-hmm. and we value mission, and I think, I was just. What is that?
Okay, I just want to say it's somewhat germane to what you're saying. So I don't know if this is even in this shot. Can people out there? Okay, so one of the things we've done together is we serve Christ here in Eastern Iowa, but we've gone to Africa together. Yeah. And one of my favorite iconic African trees is the baobab tree I discovered on my last trip.
That's the tree that you planted at the Hope Center? Okay.
Yes, yeah. Because I'm hoping it's not actually native. Oh, thank you, James. It's not actually native to that particular part of Zambia, so you don't see them around the Hope Center. But I'm hoping with some tender love and some prayer that we get, because it is an incredible, iconic African tree. I think it would be fantastic for everybody in the community to come and see that at the Hope Center also. But you can take the seeds off the baobab tree and make kind of a coffee. It's decaffeinated. It's not actually coffee beans, so I don't know why they call it coffee.
So it's not coffee.
I mean,
because I don't like coffee, but right. I like tea.
But you might like this.
Would I like that?
So let's do this. Some? Yeah. So what I did was I brewed some up, and what you're maybe going to want to do, I've got some warm milk here, and I've got some raw sugar over there. Yeah. You might want to. I'm going to say that the taste is earthy, and by earthy, I mean
black tea.
Tastes a little bit like dirt. I actually like it probably more because I love Africa.
Yeah, it's like tastes like super watered down coffee or some coffee tea mixture. I don't know. I like it. No, I like it.
You don't have to like it.
No,
Give me some cream.
Yeah. Here's some cream and sugar there can make anything good. So, that's our.
Because the thing is, we've talked about it, at the end of the Gospel of John, here's the resurrected Christ ready to send his disciples out to change the world. And what does he do? He says, hey, let me cook you breakfast. You know what I mean? We've talked about that just beautiful thing about the gospel and about the way that Jesus sends his kingdom sprawling across the world is it's a company of friends. He invites them to have breakfast. They're discouraged. They're not sure where to go with this great commission that they've been given. So they're fishing and everything. And rather than come on pretty strong to them and rebuking them for dallying at the Sea of Galilee, he's like, hey man, let's have, and then has a very poignant moment with Peter. You know what I mean? So it's not like he just backs off and they chum around, but it's over breakfast, and they're enjoying that aggressive campaign of the mission of the Great Commission is coming to them, but they're going to enjoy it together. So that's why I did this.
That's awesome. How much better is this going to be? Because we got some baobab coffee tea This can be great. So I have one of the things that I've been thinking about the mission. We did this for our staff. We guys do this Master the Restart to January. Everyone's coming back from Christmas holidays, and we just need a reset. So we take a few days of spending the mornings together, doing some time alone with the Lord, and refocusing. And one of the things that we've done the last couple years is just send people off by themselves to do some writing, some thinking and some writing. And so the writing prompt this year was think about your life or ministry and ask this question: what's an area of my life where I'm struggling to do the Lord's work in the Lord's way? Maybe it's a problem that I'm encountering, and I'm wanting to know what does it look like to, Proverbs 3. We had this defining sermon this year. Drake Epkiss preached on Proverbs 3 it was a Master of the Restart sermon. And he talked about trusting God and versus leaning on your own understanding. It was a very formative sermon that I'm going to keep going back to. But that was the prompt is we face these things in our life, and Proverbs 3 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll make your path straight. So we just said, go off and spend an hour and a half, 2 hours thinking through a challenge you're facing, and what would it look like to do the Lord's work in the Lord's way, to trust the Lord and not lean on your own understanding. And that was such an amazing. So we broke into groups of 4 or 8 groups of 4, however many people were there, and then each person read what they wrote, and then each group had to nominate someone to read to the whole staff, and so we had some different people read, and it was so moving to hear what's in the hearts of people, the challenges they're facing, the things that are coming out that they're working through. And I want to start with just a conversation about doing the Lord's work in the Lord's way. That's a phrase that, can you explain where that comes from, that idea?
Yeah, I mean, Francis Schaeffer wrote, they've got a collection of some of his shorter writings, because another one in that same vein is it No Little People? No Little People. No Little People, yeah. Where he's just talking about the kingdom. The kingdom of Jesus Christ is an upside down kingdom. We're not looking for monsters. We're not looking for giants. We're not looking for the valiant, the heroic. We're often looking for the humble. We're looking for the servants, right? And in God's economy, there are no little people. There are no insignificant people or whatever. So anyway, then Ray Ortlund gave kind of an intro and republished those two, God's Work in God's Way, The Lord's Work in the Lord's Way, and that one. And it's just to kind of recenter, recalibrate, especially leaders into, make sure you don't start falling back into a world, the way Jesus said, oh, the Gentiles do it like that, but not so among you. So it's that kind of a recalibration, like what should drive
this us. This is a recurring motif in this podcast. That's why I bring it up. You're like, we've heard that before. This should be a thread that goes through every podcast. Is when we say the Average Pastor podcast, it's not really, well, some of it is talent related, but it is a heart posture, and it's a desire to not seek greatness. This pressure that's on everyone, the pressure, it's just pressing in on us from all sides. The pressure to be significant, to leave your mark, to be great, to rise up, and it's quantifiable with social media. And how great are you? Well, just look you up on the internet and see how much, and there's that we have to fight the impulse to be a celebrity, to be significant. And it's the Lord's work. It's that there's no little people, that what we're striving for as pastors in life, as husbands, as fathers, is not greatness, but faithfulness. And so that's what we mean by that.
And I think to clarify, when you say we have to fight that kind of urge for celebrity, to use that word, just for none of us have to fight that. Like, we're not like teetering on the edge of fame or anything.
Could you hold those crowds back for me?
Yeah, like that's not a. But I think what we're trying to do is fight for the value of simplicity and not trying to make a name for yourself and be a servant and the simple things of life that are big and meaningful.
And I'm also glad that we often anchor it by going back and reading somebody else's stuff with this. We're not the first dudes that have come up with this idea of trying to re-grasp that concept of the kingdom. So going back to Francis Schaeffer, I'm just reading a unique biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, but also I just read one on C.S. Lewis and Tolkien's their friendship. And there's been a whole lot of people, men and women, who have made a great mark on the kingdom, but who sought humility and are beating this drum. And so to go back and aspire, read their stuff.
Well, don't you think even the point in we've all bonded over a love for the Lord of the Rings? It's like it's the hobbits that are the ones that are key of kind of saving the world in that story.
Right.
So I mean, even that in his famous tale, like that's a driving point in that message.
Well, and I hadn't realized until this recent biography that C.S. Lewis, at one point, he was on the cover of Time magazine. Like, he became a big deal in his lifetime. More so even after he passed, but even in his lifetime, he was being read, and all that. He continued to live a quiet life with his friends, trying to refine his own soul and spiritual journey as well as his writings and humbling himself. And there's just something remarkable. You can almost like sniff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That the aroma.
And that's
of
where the role,
humility.
because I feel like it's natural in our world to have an ambition for success, fame, recognition. What does it look like to have an ambition for a faithful, quiet life?
Yeah. You hear, what do you think of this statement? We want to do great things for a great God.
I just want clarification. I'm for that. What do you mean by great? Because even Jesus told his disciples, if you want to be great, be a servant. So it wasn't an aspiration to be great wasn't wrong. It was just what you think great is wrong. So
I think by that it's meant, because I heard that a lot growing up as go be a missionary, do great things, like go, to unreached people groups, go plant a church, go evangelize, lead the multitudes to Jesus.
It's also great to stay married to the same woman for 50 years and be a faithful dad. And that's great for the Lord.
And I even wonder, would it be a better way to say, I want to see great things for a great God? In other words, whatever my role is, maybe I'll be in the bleachers, maybe I'll be that quarterback, whatever. Hey, I just want God to be glorified. I want the gospel to go to the ends of the earth. So I want to see that. I want to see God's name made great. But as long as I'd love to see that. If somebody else is the one leading out.
And great as possible if we get a better definition of it.
So great is not equal fame for God.
No.
Hope not.
But it kind of, so I had this little conversation with one of my kids about, he's like, I finally read your book, Dad. And he's like, I don't buy it. It's like, it was this tension of, he's like, no, you say you're average, but look at our church. Like, average people don't plant a church like that. Average people don't get up in front of however many people and preach like that. And I'm like, well, one, it's actually not that great. But two, he was just like saying, how is that? How do you reconcile these? And I'm like, yes, that's the point, is that the advantage of average is in the humility, is in the thinking of yourself with sober judgment, not, letting your head swell up with pride of look at me, and whatever greatness means. It's like, let's not lose touch with Jesus' definition of that whatever God does, whatever post he puts you on, Like the higher the post, the higher you are elevated, the more you need to remember you are not a big deal. You are still an ant in front of Everest. Whatever your little, like our church, however big it might be or however big it gets, it's still an anthill compared to Everest. It's still, and people and their glory and their greatness, it's like two ants arguing about whose anthill is taller while they're in front of Mount Everest. Like, we are pastors. We are, of all people, that should run from the sin of pride and vain glory, glory that's for us. It should be us because we know God. And I think and God often uses, he uses average people, clay pots.
Well, I was actually had that thought this morning. I was reading Psalm 7, and he's talking about, Lord, my God, I seek refuge in you. So there's a stream through Psalm 7 of dependence, and you're my shield, and you're my refuge, and you're my protection. But then toward the end, he says, talking about the wicked one, he says, he dug a pit and hollowed it out, but fell into the hole he had made. His trouble comes back on his own head. His own violence comes down on top of his head, saying, no, the reckless and the wicked will get what they deserve because they've been actually digging the pit that they're falling into. They have nobody to blame but themselves. And then this thought just struck me. The very next verse, I will thank the Lord for his righteousness. I will sing about the name of the Lord Most High. And I was like, well, Lord, I've continued to dig pits. I've continued to go wayward. Thank you, God, that I will thank the Lord for his righteousness because it's not a righteousness of my own. And whatever is happening in this world is by grace. If I got what I deserved, that earlier part of the psalm would describe me. I would be getting what I deserved by my own making, by my own hands. And I would stand before the Lord and be like, oh, totally, I deserve that. But because of Jesus Christ, I thank the Lord for his righteousness and my dependence and my shield and is constantly in him, and not because I was able to meet some standard or get to some level of accomplishment, whatever.
It's intoxicating though, and this is how Christians interact with success and prosperity is very important to this concept of the advantage of average, because when you see a brother or sister ascending to the top of the temple, you see them rising in fame or glory, celebrity. It makes you nervous, and you kind of have to be on guard against that. And Jake, there was a story you told me about a famous pastor that you got to hang out with and interact with, and I'm just gonna call him Pastor Joe. Okay. And your statement was you were talking to him, and this is probably a pastor that we look to as we've read their books and enjoyed their teaching over the years, and but in the private conversation, you're like his statement. We'll call him Joe Pastor. He's like, I'm Joe freaking Pastor. I'm flying first class.
Sure.
I'm not. I'm coming to speak at this thing. I'm not flying in coach. Yeah. I'm flying first class because I'm Joe freaking Pastor. He said his name there. And your comment about him, I was like, how do you reconcile that with his ministry? And you're like, well, I think he's a hobbit that's been carrying the ring too long. What did you mean by that? And can you because I think that was a cautionary tale to me of, there's something there that's what we're talking about. That's the danger of kind of becoming celebrated and getting famous and with.
Yeah. And the stories, the Hobbits show tremendous resistance to the ring's power, but even after a long time, it starts to, and you just, in a pastor where he's been very influential in a lot of great ways, where it just kind of felt like in that conversation, like it was like, oh, you've been enjoying success for a long time. Because we were talking about culture and size dynamics and how do you adjust in leadership as your church gets bigger, and a lot of helpful stuff. But I was articulating our culture and just saying like, well, I'm not a big deal. Like nobody's a big deal. We don't want to act like a big deal. And he was like, no, you are a big deal. And I felt like, oh, get behind me. Say like in that moment of like, that's not what I need to hear. But it felt like, you had a brother that's just like, have you been carrying the ring too long?
Yeah.
Where you start to
What was the illustration about football, or I don't remember if that's the green jersey. Is that basically saying you gotta, like, you're the quarterback of the team. If you get injured,
sure,
you gotta understand that you do have a different role as a pastor, that you kind of need to protect yourself a little bit.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you're a coach of a team and you lose certain players, you're going to be hard to replace, and that makes sense in football and in sports. And there's different gifts different people bring to the body of Christ. But what we forget is like, but it's not a football team. It's the body of Christ, and he will give gifts to who needs gifts for the sake of his church. So
the football analogies, the sports analogies can go too far. Because I've started hearing stories of people talking about ministry staffs as like NIL stuff. Like these guys are free
and it can be like,
agents.
oh, well, Jake, you have a really great teaching gift. Praise God. It's a gift. If I'm effective and if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, somebody else will be a great, it's God equips his church for what they need for the season.
That feels a little, just a little corporate businessy, where the CEO is like, yeah, the company's going to be affected if the CEO is lost. But that's where the parallels don't work with the church. Because I always feel like, it's like my dad said, Mark, you're like hand in a bucket of water. You pull your hand out, it's not going to leave the shape of Mark in the water. The water level will just, the kingdom and Christ is the fullness. So not only will the water level not go down after I leave, it's like Christ is the fullness.
But do you even think a distortion of success in ministry, where a lot of times pastors or leading churches think, well, the church has to be successful. So successful means growing. It's got to. You don't think of success as you need to be faithful. Faithful may be shrinking. Faithful may be a hard season. Faithful may be growing. It may not be growing, but the success is faithful.
The most impressive thing that I heard this week was a church that fell apart, and there's a couple that is continuing to meet with like 5 other families, faithfully gathering, and their church has just imploded, and yet they continue to march on. And I feel like the church in Smyrna, that, hey, you guys are poor, you guys are persecuted, and that was a church. Jesus is like,
even back to just, again, that we're not the first ones to stumble across this stuff. That, again, with Bonhoeffer, I mean, faithfulness for him. In fact, the book I'm reading is The Faithful Spy, because the church in Germany was across the board selling out to Nazism, which is shocking to the modern reader. Like, wait, churches were supporting the annihilation of Jews? Yes. Yeah. There was something in the cultural air that was so intoxicating. And so when he wasn't alone, faithful pastors stood their ground and said, no, we'll go underground if we have to. We'll figure out a way to continue to be faithful to Jesus. We look back and we say, no, some of those other churches might have been growing during that time, waving the Nazi flag and collecting people. But we look back and we're like, oh no, the ones that were faithful were the ones that held that light when it would have been extinguished in Europe, and they held it strong. And maybe for a time they were having to protect it, If
your only vantage point was what, like Germany in that moment, what did that do to those churches' success?
Right.
So I feel like a bad definition of success can be killing pastors and churches. But you can apply that principle further. A bad definition of success will wreck your life, wreck your marriage. If you're just shooting at the wrong target, you're frustrated, you feel like a failure, or you succeed and it goes to your head and pride disrupts you. So getting a good definition of success is game changing in life, because it's like, I don't have to grow this big church. I got to be faithful. I don't have to, have a Fortune 500 company. I need to treat my employees well.
Well, in one chapter of Luke that we're going through in Iowa City, Mark took the first chunk of the second 2/3 of Luke 4. Anyway, that Jesus goes back to his hometown, speaks the truth, and they run him out of town and want to kill him. They want to throw him over a cliff. He moves on to Capernaum, preaches with authority, and the people are like, "Oh, don't leave. Stay here. We want to hear more." Jesus was faithful to do the exact same thing, preach the word, like he's speaking the truth. The response was radically different. So if you just took a snapshot of Nazareth, what a failure. He's getting kicked out of the first church he ever preaches in. Like that can't, the outward success, certainly if you're going to track with Jesus, that's not going to be.
So an example of this, and we talked about this, were our building campaign, and we're just calling it a building offering. It's not really a campaign, no slogans. No, it's just like, hey, want to build, God's growing the church. But anyway, Jeff and I had this little, I don't want to call it an argument, but a discussion about, and I think I want to process this because I don't know if I agree with me or you on this, but you said here's a conversation like, okay, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, Lord's work in the Lord's way. Okay, let's apply all that to this raising money for a building. We've talked about this before, but my thing was, I think had we done a traditional fundraising campaign, do all the things, we've heard the consultants, we know what they're going to say, bring in the consultant, and what are you going to do? There's a way to raise funds that I'm uncomfortable with. And I think had we gone the traditional fundraising route, we would have raised more money by millions of dollars. I think that. Yeah. You were kind of saying, I don't know about that. I don't know if that's true.
Or at least what I said is, I don't know. Maybe not. I'm just saying, like, in the way that we did it, we got to save our soul, especially Mark's soul. Just because you're the leader, you were the one out there. I'm saying, could it demonstrably be proven that we would have actually gained more money by just pulling the levers of what the experts say? I think it could be true, but I'm not convinced of it.
Okay, but here's why I think we would have is
let's have this fight in real time.
Here's the lever.
Brought into this.
Here's the lever. Maybe you can mediate this. Here's the lever. Here's what the consultant's going to say. You find the 30 to 50 top givers or wealthiest people with giving capacity, because you're not going to raise millions of dollars with the widow's mite. They need to be involved. You need to share the whole vision with the whole church, but you start with your high capacity givers.
Your whales.
Yes.
Story for another time.
Yes. And we've talked about the whales before, and you start with them. You meet with them one-on-one as a pastor. So Jeff, if you and I had found the top 30 givers, neither of us know who they are because we would have to find that out, because that's a decision we made to not know what people give. So we would have found those people. You and I probably would have set up meetings. We would have been, for the last year, maybe 6 months, we would have been meeting with them one-on-one. We would have been working with our production team. James, you would have been very busy with videos.
James is thankful we did.
We're gonna.
Thanks for not doing the traditional campaign. I appreciate that.
So you would have been very busy making pamphlets and flyers, and this thing would have been. We would have had pictures and it's all, of course, not about the building, it's about the vision. We would have made the vision clear, make disciples, nice glossy brochures, and there's nothing wrong with all that, right? But, you and I, Jeff, we would have sat down with those people, and we would have, how's your family? And, been their pastor. And then at the end, we would have invited them to a banquet. We would have, talk to them about, hey, what would you think about doing?
What kind of banquet? Because I might get on Jeff's side if it's a nice banquet.
I don't think you're in the whale category, Jake. If there's barbecue, Jake wants to be at the banquet. But so we would have
we serve baobab seed, whatever this is.
Yeah.
So we would have, and here's why I know you would have raised more money, because had you done that to me, and the elders, we would have gone around and been like, how much are you giving? How much are you giving? And we would have pressed each other. And can you do more? Can you sell this and do that? And had you done that for me, had the elders done it to me, I would have given more. But that's the problem, is that one of the reflections on my giving in the past is Letha, my wife, she's like, Mark, I don't know if you were a cheerful giver as much as you were a competitive giver. Like, you were told leaders lead, you don't want to ask people to do what you're not willing to do. And there kind of becomes a pressure from the group to give more, to see. So I think of it individually, I probably would have given more. Now, when I started saying, hey, I think we need to tell people, hey, what about your stored resources? What about dipping into your Roth IRAs? And what about emptying out retirement stuff? And you guys as elders were like, hey, ho. This is not, we are not wanting to compel, or we don't want compulsive giving. If people want to do that,
because here's the danger, right? In that moment, it's like, well, maybe just letting people know what we're doing and going on and preaching the Bible as normal. Oh, what if that doesn't work? In that case, let's reach back and use those tools after all, the ones that we said we weren't going to use out of our kind of our moral compass, our ethical compass, biblical compass. Yeah, but it's not working. So let's let's reach back and start using all the levers and tools that we know will work pragmatically,
So I think that those are examples of doing the Lord's work. Now, this is where I have to be careful, because doesn't mean that you couldn't do all those things in a godly way with pure motives. So maybe this is more about me not trusting my motives more than anything, but I think we could have been, so success. I think if success was getting the money to build a new building, if that was the goal, I think we could have hit that target and been more successful. But that was not our definition of success. The definition of success for us was, we want this to be a spiritual process that people give in private. Like, let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. We want this to be between people and the Lord, not us working. It just felt a little, for us, we don't want to lose our pastoral integrity through the process. So it's not that would be a wrong way to do it, or people couldn't do it that way. But for us as an elder team, we decided we're not going to pull those levers.
So much so that I have a friend, goes to Veritas, and because of a series of things, they weren't able to be there the last couple of weeks and weren't going to be there again this week. So he's like, hey, so he hands me a check for me to take to Veritas. And I'm in this awkward moment, like, what do I do now with it? To put it in my pocket seems really weird. Like, I'm pocketing somebody's gift that, because I really wanted to continue to hold it. I don't know who is giving what. Now, all of a sudden, and he's a friend, he knew I would faithfully take it and just give it to the right person. But it's that awkward moment, right? Where I'm like, oh man, I want to stay so far away from being the front man on soliciting all these gifts. You know what I mean? So I got in my car, I put it on the seat next to me, and I'm like, well, that's stupid. Anybody walking by my parked car is going to see this check. Anyway, so I finally put it in my pocket. Got it to the right place. Yeah. And I got it to the right place, but anyways, but those moments where I'm like, I seriously don't want to be the one that's compelling or transporting or whatever.
So God's providing. It's been so fun to see God's provision. Okay, but Jake, how would you mediate this? Like, it's not really a conflict, but because we're synced up. But this idea of, I'm saying, oh, we could have raised way more money had we, but it's not. And Jeff's
because my point of the actual amount that was raised is, But along the way, how many people do you offend? So they walk away from God's church, not just not give what you hope they'd give, but they're like, oh, is that what this is about? You're going to sit with me one-on-one. So I'm just saying, like, even at the level of the monetary amount at the end, I'm not convinced that had we pulled all the levers, we would have gotten more money. I think it's possible. I'm also saying God's supernatural blessing on doing it this way, and even on that level of personal offense. We just let the Holy Spirit prompt people to give what they wanted to give. And anyway, so Jake, drop the gavel. Who's right?
I don't know if you want my opinion on this.
I do. Yeah.
That I get what you're saying in the campaign, where it can just feel icky of just we're being manipulative to our people, targeting certain people to give certain amounts to get a goal. That none of us went into ministry to be fundraisers.
Right.
We went in to be pastors. Pastoring involves discipleship. Discipleship involves hard, challenging conversations.
Yep.
What's behind this issue is there's not hard conversations that need to be had about giving to a campaign, but there's hard conversations that need to be had about giving, because if your church is like most churches, if your members just tithed, you would pay in cash for this building project. You wouldn't need to do a campaign.
Yeah.
So I get it in the sense of like, hey, doing a campaign, we don't want to do it this way. It's kind of icky. But the fact that we have to do a campaign to do this means we probably should have some conversations, but not about a building, but about where your treasure is, there your heart is also. So what does it say about the hearts of our people that we're in this situation in the first place?
Yeah, that's fair. But here's the deal. Wouldn't we or shouldn't we have those critical conversations apart from the fact it should always just match up when we
Not
don't
when
mind
we need to.
We don't mind that they're unfaithful until all of a sudden we need that money to
Like,
you know what
we're
I'm saying?
not in a
So-
campaign, we're not building anything,
Right.
we're not doing, and we need to have some money talks.
And
we need to have
here's
some
what-
hard talks.
But Jake, here's what I'm saying. I listen to your messages. I think every now and then you probably listen to ours as well. And we do talk to people about money because the Bible talks about money. We do.
Yeah, that wasn't imposed that you're not.
No,
I'm just saying
no, I know
those
you're
type of conversations, if it's like, well, we'll just let people give what they want.
Yes.
They have been, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
You know, they have been
Yeah,
giving
yeah,
just
yeah.
what they want.
Yes.
And what they want has shown something.
But I guess my thing is if the challenge is, yes, we need to have even one-on-one directed conversations because of the unfaithfulness of some people, we should do that regardless of if that gets us to the next stage of a building campaign. It should be because we treasure their hearts and souls before their creator.
Yeah.
And like we would with any other sin issue that they had in their lives, we want them to be walking with Christ in those ways. You know what I'm saying? So that's,
There's, and I'm tempted to not, it's like I on this podcast, I think one of the challenges is how much do we talk about and share with people how the sausage is made? Like, how much do we tell people? They're like, I don't know if I like church. I mean, all the hypocrisy. I'm like, you don't even know the half of it. Like, if you.
Well, I don't know about that either.
Okay. No,
That's an endorsement.
I think what I'm saying is, I think there's it's when is it. You don't want to posture. I don't want to in this conversation posture ourselves as we have the way, and if you do it that way, you're wrong. If you did it that way, that's not the intent. But I do think, when is it Matthew 23? Jesus saying, "All right, guys, here's what the Pharisees do. They do it this way. I'm telling you, that's wrong." And he goes through and he's like the woes. Woe to you who you guys tithe off your cumin and cinnamon, all your spices, but yet you do this. Woe to you who do this. And so when is it good to say, hey, you've seen how they do it in the business world.
Right.
You've seen how they go for power and exert influence and how they rise to, it's like you've seen that. But I tell you, this is the kingdom way. This is the way of, this is the Lord's. So when is it like you want to be careful about
who are you pointing to? Because he's pointing at the Pharisees and saying, don't do it this way. And I think we can point at the corporate world and be like, don't do it this way. But there's also a sense of, but do it this way. So for Paul, follow me as I follow Christ. Here's an example of how to do this. Or the example he gives of the Macedonians giving sacrificially out of their poverty and affliction. Like, okay, he's telling the Corinthians, give this way. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to both point out what we don't want to do and point out what we do want to do.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a compelling thing. Paul had a very specific project. It was to take money back to Jerusalem because of the famine and because of the widows, and the church there was incapable of keeping up with the needs. So, hey, other churches, let's pool our money and help back there. But the thing is, he wanted actually to stay away from those one-on-one, eyeball-to-eyeball conversations. So he even said to the Corinthians, get this done before I come. I think you should all give. I think that you should follow the pattern of Jesus and think of others as more important than yourself. But do that. I'm just going to preach you. This is the gospel when it comes to your finances. So when I come to town, have it all collected and ready, because I don't want to sit down with your whales. You know what I mean? I want you to do that out of the overflow and the abundance of your heart.
And there was also of, hey, don't be a compulsive giver, be a cheerful giver. Mm-hmm. And let me give you an example of what it should look like too with the message. So there was a both and of not just, it's totally up to you.
Yeah.
Follow your heart in your giving. Yeah. But it's like, should we always follow our heart in our giving?
Oh, I think it's right to put the pressure on, because it's Jesus putting the pressure on to be generous as he is generous. For sure. I'm not saying take the sting out of it there, but there's something different about
I'm with you.
You know what I mean?
It's the one-on-one sit down, because the disingenuousness is like, if I'm a wealthier person, let's all use our imaginations here. And you're sitting down with me to have a giving talk.
Yeah.
And it's the first time you've ever talked to me about this. Yes. And you need a building. That's where it's like, you don't really care about my heart.
Oh, yesterday.
You care about getting this building.
This was hilarious yesterday.
But if you did that and you're not debuilt, now I'm like, oh, you're a pastor shepherding my heart.
But would I? Yeah, because sorry, I will get to it.
Go.
Because I totally, Jake. The thing is, if I'm meeting up with someone, and this happens often, right? I want to also know: do you love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? Are you loving your neighbor? Mm-hmm. Do you love your wife? Do you love your children? There are so many foundational issues of where this person is at spiritually that I feel like would be more natural to observe and respond. Before I got to, and by the way, what's in your wallet? Can we?
But do you think we get to these points where campaigns, because we've never had, it's like, I've always talked to you about this, and this, because there's something always more important. But it's where your treasure is, there your heart is.
That's the justification.
It's really important.
Yeah, that's the justification for the consultant bringing it. Is there? I think the main thing they're going to say, hey, this is a discipleship opportunity. So if I'm looking at best motives for having those conversations, I think, what better opportunity for a discipleship campaign than a building campaign? So I think that's the good in maybe doing some of that. That I understand that maybe our pendulum has swung, but there's this happened to me yesterday. That's why hilarious we're talking about this. I get a Facebook Messenger from a guy I haven't heard of in years. A guy I played ball with and had to look him up. What's this? He's like reaching out, man, you still playing ball, dude? And I was like, I had to start, sending back like, no way, it's so cool. He reached out, and pretty soon the next one was, are you 100% happy with your insurance? And I was like, dang, you got me.
I know.
Yeah. So
don't you hate that?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to do that with people.
No.
It is. That's so. That feels so slimy. Right.
Totally.
I know what you want.
By the way,
do you want to come
I have these vitamins.
Yeah. Well, this guy,
because I love you.
Hey, I was
three friends.
I was talking to a brother the other day, and we were talking, and he's like, "Hey, people ask me for money all the time. And the reason we met is not because I reached out to him. He reached out to me and was like, had some questions about stuff. And we sat down and talked. It was an amazing conversation. The best part of the conversation was, how's your family? And for me to have integrity of like, I didn't call this meeting. You're the one that,
right.
And so and then him opening up about, yeah, I've been like, that's my whole life, is being on the other side of those conversations. Like, what do you want from me?
Right.
What if the church did a giving campaign that was not connected to any, like, well, what are we doing with
that?
What's the money going to? The Lord.
Yeah.
Like, it's just going to be, especially in our worship context today, I think we both operate the same, where one, a lot of our givers give online, or there's just a box in the back.
Yeah.
So you never actually practice
Right.
give, you used to pass the plate or go forward, where it was an actual part of our worship, and maybe we need to recapture some.
Well, I think like in the spirit of what happened in the book of Acts with going around to the other churches, if it were because, and this could happen, if the drought really nails Zambia in this next growing season the way it did last, it really might be that you at your church and us at our church are going to say, hey, we are going to take an offering for God's church in Zambia, because they can't feed, the churches can't feed all the people that are hungry, which is exactly what happened in Jerusalem, right? And so I do think, honestly, our people would be incredibly responsive in that moment. You know what I mean? And
But do you think, and I agree with that, and that's the example, in Acts, there was real needs.
Yep.
Do you think this is the case, and if it is it necessarily wrong, that the tendency to be very pragmatic in our giving? Like, I'm not giving because it's unto the Lord only, but I can help meet that need, and I can, and if I like that need, I'll help meet it. If where it's very
targeted.
I think we do this taking it off of money. I think one way we lean on our understanding and do the Lord's work in our way is, I think, how talent can justify ascending to the top of the temple. Like we find people with great talent, and we will turn a blind eye to character deficiencies because this person is a monster and they're crushing it. And we hear that was a home run sermon, and they're even that language where like this person is. We justify elevating people based on talent over character, and we kind of see these cracks in the foundation, but look at how dynamic they are. And
so I think when you put talent over character, you open the door to then put talent over truth. Because if a really talented person, you don't really care about their character, then you're going to care less when they say something that's like, I don't know if that's accurate, but boy, they're so compelling. And you've already elevated that priority. I was reading this morning in the beginning of the book of Galatians, like, if even an angel, gives you a gospel contrary to what I gave you, let him be accursed. It's like, think of the most impressive being, let that person be accursed if they're go off on the truth. So.
Well, I started giggling to myself when you were describing, somebody with a lot of talent. So I got to go watch a couple of my grandsons wrestle in a little local wrestling tournament. And at one point in the award ceremony thing, I look up this is one of the times, it wasn't the bracket that my grandsons were in. And there's this little kid that won first, and he's up there and he's giving the big muscle thing, but his arms they look like noodles there. And it was just
like
so
the 103 weight class.
Tiny little, he's up there and he's like you would think that, he's Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever up there. And I'm just thinking, is that what Jesus? I wonder if Jesus is out when he sees somebody thinking, "Dude, I'm gonna crush it," and he's out there giving the little smile, kind of giving the little golf clap, like, "You little puny, good for you, boy."
Those arms of yours, that's
you really did it. And you're well done, buddy.
That's such a picture. And so how do you value faith? When you see, because obviously you don't want to hold people that are gifted and talent. What's your approach with gifted, young, emerging leaders in the church? How do you help them grow as a
Yeah, it's an issue of stewardship. So some 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. So the guy who has a lot of gifts or talents, I don't want him to feel bad for that. I want him to feel responsible to steward that well, but valuing servanthood and humility and a faithfulness of quiet life while he exercises those gifts.
I think young people, myself as an example, and I think you guys all need to pass the faithfulness test. What is the faithfulness test? If there's a constant ascension to the top and the crowds are just this big crowd to this big crowd to this bigger crowd, I think you, at some point in your ministry development, you need an opportunity for the ladder to go down.
Yes.
And are you willing to do that? Are you willing to take on the ignoble task for the king? And
well, especially if we see those character qualities in an emerging, really gifted leader, and we don't bring correction because we want to keep them puffed up, we want to keep them, almost propped up. That's a problem, right? Because if we get out of the way, Jesus knows how to pull the rug out from under somebody that needs that. If humility isn't sought after, he knows a way to bring humiliation in order to bring humility, right? And we've got to be willing for young leaders to undergo that and actually be active in that. When we see something from the scriptures that doesn't match up with their lives, we can't kind of insulate them from hard discipleship. In fact, they probably require more scrutiny and more of those kind of conversations from more veteran pastors. It's actually what discipleship is, right? I mean, that's what we should be doing at every stage.
For sure.
yeah, it's good. Well, man, I had all these things that I wanted to talk about that we didn't even get to.
What's the title of this episode?
I don't know. James will figure it out.
I keep a running note on my phone, and it's
Yeah.
getting long.
James
The long one.
It's going to be a 3-line title.
James figures out what we're talking about after the fact.
The advantage of ADD. And, there you go.
Hey, but before we sign off, we did get a criticism, right? It was.
Here's what I'm wondering, James. What do you think of this idea? We can either extend this a little bit, or we could just stop and do another.
Maybe that'll be the
just
cliffhanger.
another
The
episode.
next episode. Well,
Can we do that? Do we have time to sneak in an extra episode?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's
Well, are you talking about a bonus episode, or we're just going to
bonus episode.
Like a 15-minute.
A bonus episode. Are you okay with a bonus episode next time?
Do they do
It'll be
that?
a shorter one, and
Yeah.
then we'll.
Do they do bonus episodes, or do we just stumble on a new thing?
I think we're creating a new format. I think we just invented something.
Yeah.
wait, I think you actually have to be a subscriber or something.
Oh,
Can we monetize?
Subscribe, like and subscribe.
Yeah, don't forget.
Can we monetize this part? Like if you're a special
Hey,
guest
let's
that you
finish that
pay.
campaign. Let's finish that billing
This is
campaign.
brought to you
right?
by the Vitamin multi-level marketing, whatever.
Yes.
I'm going to start selling
yes.
this stuff. And
Tell
by
your
the
friends.
way,
Oh yeah.
if you have not yet gotten your Baobab,
Baobab seed coffee.
Like tree beans.
Baobab seed
Hit the
coffee.
link below.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's. We'll call it. Someone needs to sign us off. So Jeff,
oh man,
You wanna-
I knew you were going to do that.
you want to sign us off today?
Yeah. You know what? Let's just honor Christ, be humble. We love you guys. We'll see you next time.
Awesome.